They call this cat food. I call it psychological warfare to divorce you from your money. Walk into any big box store in America and stop at the cat food aisle. Just give yourself a minute to take it all in. The wall of color, the graphic design, the photography. It seems premium, almost artisanal. You've got indoor formula, sensitive stomach, urinary care, grain-free, ocean whitefish with garden greens. It looks like a free market doing exactly what a free market is supposed to do. Dozens of brands fighting for your dollar, each one promising something a little better than the package next to it. That wall is one of the slickest cons in American retail, and the cat in your house is paying for it with its kidneys. The food in your cat's bowl was designed to please you, not the cat. Your cat doesn't have a say in it, but you do, and that's the whole game. Let's start with the truth behind that wall. Count the brands, count the designs. Now look at who really owns all of them. The top 5 companies in pet food own more than half the market. Mars Pet Care and Nestle Purina sit at the top of those, and the two of them pull in about a third of global sales just on their own. Mars doesn't just own the cheap stuff like Whiskas and Sheba. They bought their way onto the premium shelf too, like Nutro. The bags look different, the price points are different, the owners are not. And Mars didn't stop at the food. They bought the places the cats go when they get sick. They own VCA Animal Hospitals. They own Banfield. They own Blue Pearl. The same company making the food also owns the clinic that treats the sicknesses the food causes. They own the problem and they own the cure. For them, the cash register rings either way. The advice your vet gives you didn't start in a classroom, it started in a boardroom. The big companies pour money into veterinary school research. They pay for the nutritional textbooks. They bankroll the residency programs. So when your vet hands you a prescription diet, they're often just repeating a lesson that was bought and paid for years before they even became a vet. That wall of choice is a stage set. Step behind that set, and there's almost nobody there. Before we talk about what's on the label, we need to talk about what's in the vat. Commercial cat food starts at a rendering plant. Think of it as the food industry's garbage disposal. The rendering plant takes everything the food supply can't use and wouldn't dare put in front of a human and turns it into commercial feed. There's an official name for the main ingredients. The FDA calls it 4D livestock. The 4Ds stand for dead, dying, diseased, or disabled. Animals that showed up at the plant in no condition to be suitable for human food. All of this is legal for pet food under a rule called CPG Section 675.200. The FDA's own rulebook spells it out, and the title says it all. Diversion of adulterated food to acceptable animal feed use. It lets the agency send food that's too contaminated for people straight into animal feed. That includes meat and poultry that the USDA already pulled from grocery store shelves. This isn't a gap in the rules. It is the rule. And it gets worse. When supermarkets have meat sitting past the sell-by date, a lot of that goes into the vat too. Not just the meat, the packaging also. The plastic trays, the foam pads, the shrink wrap. Pulling it apart by hand costs too much, so it goes in whole. The fat that comes out can carry bits of plastic and other junk. Some of that ends up in your cat's bowl. Then that slurry goes through an extruder. That's a machine that uses high heat and crushing pressure to force the meat slurry through a shaped hole. Out the other side comes little nuggets we call kibble. All that heat and force kills the protein and wipes out the vitamins. What you get is a gray, dead little pellet with nothing left in it. No smell, no flavor. Your cat would walk right past it. So companies solve that problem with a product called Animal Digest. It's a soup of broken down animal guts sprayed directly on the kibble after it's cooked. It adds no nutrition. It's a smell built in a laboratory to trick your cat's nose. Your cat isn't smelling food. It's smelling a chemical scent that triggers feeding behavior. By now, the food's got nothing left in it. So the companies buy chemical packs called premixes. These are vitamin and mineral mixes made overseas, often in plants with little to no oversight. They dump them in to hit the minimum numbers on paper. The food doesn't have nutrition in it. It's got chemicals standing in for nutrition. Wet cat food doesn't go through the same extruder, but it goes through a very different kind of machine. Wet food gets sealed in metal cans and cooked under high pressure, a process called retort. This isn't cooking for flavor. It's an industrial sterilization process intended to prevent botulism. But the retort process destroys about a third of the thiamine in the food, or even more if it's cooked longer. That's a vitamin your cat can't live without. So to compensate, manufacturers add the same kind of chemical premixes we talked about earlier. But manufacturers' expectations don't always match what really happens in the can. Testing the finished cans isn't required, and that process is inconsistent across the industry. Some companies catch a bad batch internally. Others don't find out until cats get sick. When manufacturers get it wrong, the results are very bad. A thiamine deficiency in cats starts quietly. They have decreased appetite, drooling, vomiting, weight loss, and this is over several weeks. Left undiagnosed, it can turn into a fast neurological crash. Catch it too late and the results are life-threatening. If caught at the neurological stage and treated, most cats will recover. But some cats make it through the late-stage thiamine deficiency and are left with permanent damage. The lights are on, but nobody's home, and some end up special needs after that. This can be hard to trace back to a specific batch. It might not show up for weeks or even months. The food itself can sit on a shelf for up to 2 years before it reaches a bowl. In 2011, Wellness recalled 21.6 million cans for exactly this problem, insufficient thiamine. That recall notice says no illnesses were reported, but adverse event reporting only catches a tiny fraction of what's actually happening, even in systems that are built for it. 21 million cans isn't a number where you can assume 0 cats got sick. It's a number where nobody was counting closely enough to even know. On top of that, the can itself is lined with an epoxy to keep it shelf stable, and it's been proven these chemicals leach back into the food over time, causing a separate set of problems entirely. Take that how you like. The pet food industry is an industrial waste pipeline wearing a food label. Everything else downstream flows from that one fact. Ingredients get listed by weight, heaviest first, measured before cooking. That's a federal rule. It sounds like it protects you, but it doesn't. This is how the trick works. Raw meat is about 75 to 80% water. It weighs a ton going into the mixer. Corn, peas, and wheat are dry, about 10% moisture. So when they dump raw soggy chicken into the vat, the chicken sits at the top of the ingredient list by weight. When the extruder runs, that moisture gets flash boiled off into steam and you're left with dry kibble. That first place chicken shrinks down to almost nothing. Redo that ingredient list after cooking and the chicken drops to 4th or even 5th place, and the dry corn takes the top spot easily. You bought a chicken first cat food. What your cat ate was mostly carbohydrates and industrial grade food starch. The playbook even goes one step deeper. It's a trick called ingredient splitting. If a food is mostly corn, but they don't want that listed first on the ingredient list, they split it into a few different ingredients. Ground yellow corn, corn gluten meal, corn flour, and so on. Each one weighs a little less on its own, so none of them will take the top spot. The heavy raw chicken jumps to number 1 on the ingredient list. Add the 3 corn forms back together and the facts get reversed. Then the corn sits at the top. Now look at what's missing from the panel on the back of the package. State rules make them list crude fat, crude protein, crude fiber, and moisture. Notice what they never have to list? Carbohydrates. There's not even a line for it. The rule lets them hide the number 1 number that tells the actual truth. The real number at the end that's important is the food is 16% pure sugar and starch. Cats' systems can't handle that. At all. If the label was printed as it is when your cat actually gets it, the protein would sit at 10%, fat 5%, ash 2.5%, fiber 1%, and nearly 16% would be starch. The rest is labeled moisture required for processing. The facts and figures are in a report linked in the description. The companion documents to this report are all on our Patreon. These companies make up these numbers themselves. Most receipts never get tested before the label gets printed. They run software that pulls from a database and spits out the estimates. And when a brand does pay for a real lab test, the results are theirs to keep, locked up behind closed doors using non-disclosure agreements with the laboratories. If a batch comes back bad, your cat never gets the email. The damage this food doesn't show up in a day or a week. It builds up quietly over months and years. By the time your cat is sick, you can't trace it to the food on paper, and certainly not in any courtroom. That's not by accident, it's the whole plan. You see, cats are obligate carnivores. That's not a preference, it's a biological fact. Their bodies run on animal protein and fat. Their bodies don't make enzymes to handle a bunch of carbs or sugar. Their pancreas simply can't handle those chemicals, at all. Yet the kibble in your cat's bowl is packed with corn, wheat, soy, peas, and potatoes. Not because your cat needs them, because the extruder needs them. You can't push a high-meat slurry through an extruder and get it to form pellets. You need starch to bind it. The machine wrote the recipe, and your cat's needs were barely an afterthought. Feed a cat of lifetime commercial cat food and the risks stack up. Insulin resistance, obesity, type 2 feline diabetes, the slow breakdown you'd expect from feeding a meat eater mostly starch for years. Millions of cats are living that horrifying outcome right now. Cats evolved mostly in deserts. Their ancestors rarely drank water. They got most of their moisture from prey. The prey animals consisted of about 70 to 80% moisture. A cat's thirst is naturally low because it was never built to drink all that much. Their diet supplied most of what they needed. Kibble, on the other hand, sits under 10% moisture. Feed a cat nothing but dry food for years and you create a state of perpetual low-grade dehydration. The kidneys try to compensate. They work harder to compensate year over year. Then they start to fail. Chronic kidney disease is one of the top killers of cats in America, and it's not just the older cats. It affects young cats as well. There's rarely a single cause, and nobody honest would claim otherwise. But keep a desert-evolved animal in a state of dehydration for years and the kidneys will fail. It's a dark and tragic end. There's a line you can trace here. Years of nothing but commercial cat food, years of being a little dehydrated and sick all the time, then a fluid pump at the vet's office in the end. The company that makes the kibble probably owns the clinic running the pump. Read that any way you like. The canned wet food brings a different kind of threat. Inside of every metal can is coated with epoxy resins that contain BPA, which has been proven to wick into the food. For 2 decades, research has shown a clear and persistent correlation between canned food diets and feline hypothyroidism. Whether it's the BPA, the flame retardants accumulating in fish, or inconsistent iodine levels, the can is the common denominator in those endocrine failures. So why hasn't somebody stopped it? Walk through the system with me and you'll understand. The group that sets the ingredient rules for cat food in America is called AAFCO, or AAFCO as it's referred to, the Association for American Feed Control Officials. When a label says complete and balanced nutrition as established by AAFCO, that line sounds official. It sounds regulated. Here's the part that never makes it on the label. AAFCO is not a government agency. They have zero power to enforce anything. They have no inspectors, no laboratories, and they can't fine anyone. They can't even order a recall. They can't shut down a plant. What they are is a voluntary club of state officials and industry insiders. They write the official book of guidelines and sell it back to the same industry that's writing them checks. The FDA goes along with those industry-written rules. That leaves a gray zone where proving food hurts your cat is almost impossible on paper. Since AAFCO and the FDA don't test food on store shelves themselves, the job falls to the state agricultural departments. In Texas, that's the office of the Texas State Chemist out of College Station. Once in a while, they do actually pull stuff off the shelf and run lab tests. When a test matches a violation, they can hand out what's called a stop sale order. But it's like firing a bottle rocket at the moon. They pick what to test with a system that flags companies with known previous violations. A brand new product that's bad from a company with a clean record will slip right through. The state office tests a tiny slice of the thousands of products on shelves. On top of that, the label only has to hit a minimum number for protein and fat. A company can promise a low bar like 26% protein, pass every state audit, and stuff the rest of the bag with cheap crap your cat can't use. All of this is by the book. And when they do catch something, what happens next tells you how the whole system is actually rigged. The manufacturer does not get fined. They get time to reword the label so it matches the bad product and update the paperwork. They pull the batch off shelves quietly, and the stop sale order goes away. The company gets a clerical note, and the cat who already ate the bad batch doesn't get a do-over. State lab tests mostly check the numbers on the label: protein minimum, fat minimum. What they don't test is the condition that fat is in. There's a simple test for whether fat has gone rancid. It's cheap, it's routine, and nobody in the system is required to run it. So a bag can pass every test on the books and still have fat that's gone bad. Rancid fat puts off chemicals that destroy the vitamins along with your cat's stomach lining. The system tests for a lying label, not for harmful ingredients. The panel on the back of that cat food is not a health stamp. It's a legal shield. It does the bare minimum the state requires and buries the rest in jargon. The canned food adds one more layer of failure. The Center for Veterinary Medicine regulates the contents, while a different FDA office regulates the can lining via the Food Contact Notification process. This administrative wall ensures that no one is responsible for testing the final, shelf-staged product for chemical migrations. They do not test it when it is new. They do not test it after 2 years on a shelf. They do not test it at all. At the middle of this sits the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Remember them? One arm of the FDA is the Center for Veterinary Medicine, or CVM for short. Congress told the FDA under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to keep animal feed safe, labeled correctly, and free from poisonous things. The CVM got the job of checking that. In 1992, Congress passed the Prescription Drug User Fee Act for humans. Before that, the FDA ran purely on tax dollars. The PDUFA let drug companies pay fees straight to the FDA to speed up their approval processes. The results were now about half the FDA's budget comes straight from the industry it's supposed to be policing. The FDA liked that setup, a lot. So in 2003, they got Congress to do the same thing with the animal feed side. The Animal Drug User Fee Act, or ADUFA. Now animal drug and feed companies pay the FDA directly to push approvals through and write the rules. The FDA isn't some watchdog sniffing around your cat's food. They're a service provider trying to hit deadlines for clients that sign the checks. The check's clear and the rules stay nice and friendly. The FDA says it keeps an eye on the pet food supply. By their own published numbers, that eye barely opens. There are over 3,000 pet food plants running in the U.S. at any given time. In recent years, the FDA and its state-run partners combined inspected about 100 of them. The FDA itself only did a handful of those. The state offices did the rest. A lot of those only happened because somebody complained enough, not because of scheduled routine checks. If you're running a cat food plant in this country, your odds of a federal inspector showing up in any given year are under 3%. A plant could run 30 years without a federal inspector ever walking in, unless somebody complains loud enough to force their hand. Under the ADUFA, getting a new animal drug approved runs a company over $700,000 per application, another $200,000 a year in processing plant fees, and another $165,000 a year for each company. Across the wider FDA, these industry fees now cover about half of the agency's operating budget, or more. The very people who are supposed to police these companies' bad behaviors are paid by checks the same companies sign. If the FDA cracks down, its own budget shrinks. The whole setup was not designed with your cat in mind. If you push the FDA on its weak enforcement, it will simply point at the states. The Texas numbers show what that really means. The state chemist office gets its own budget on what's called a tonnage tax. Manufacturers pay 19 cents a ton on feed sold in the state of Texas. So the state regulator's budget rides precisely on how much feed moves through Texas. The more rendering waste that ships, the more money the state pulls in. The regulator and the industry it's watching want the exact same thing. More, more, more. The system isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. A multi-billion-dollar garbage pipeline where the pet food industry pays the government for the right to police themselves, and your cat pays with its kidneys. Okay, so enough about the system. Let's talk about the people running it, because that's where things get really weird. There's a hallway in College Park, Maryland. It's a real office building with real offices and real people who clock in every morning. Those people put their names on the rules that keep this whole shindig running. We're not making anybody up. Every name we're about to mention comes straight off the public record. I'm not the judge, I'm just the investigator. I'll present you with the facts and you can decide what you think is happening. Let's start at the top. The man running the whole show is Dr. Timothy Schell. Pull up his resume and you'll see that he spent 14 years inside the FDA's CVM office. That's the Center for Veterinary Medicine we mentioned earlier. Then in 2015, he walked out and went to work for Elanco. Elanco is one of the biggest animal drug companies on the planet. He ran Elanco's regulatory strategy division for 4 years. There he learned exactly how to get things through the FDA and its regulators from the company's side of things. Then he miraculously went back to the FDA. By October of 2025, he was sitting at the top chair of the whole FDA's Center for Veterinary Medicine. Now watch what happens next. Weeks after Dr. Schell takes that chair, the FDA does something the agency's never once done in its entire history. The FDA hands out the first emergency authorization for an animal drug, ever. The drug's called Credelio. The company that makes Credelio is Elanco. That's the same company Dr. Schell spent 4 years working at. Now, to be straight with you, the emergency was real. A flesh-eating parasite is moving up towards the southern border, and there wasn't any approved treatment. That part's true, and we aren't going to pretend that it isn't. But here's the thing. The new director's old employer got the first authorization of its kind in the agency's entire existence weeks into his watch. Make of that what you will. But Dr. Schell isn't the only one inside the CVM with a wonky playbook. Walk down the hall from his office and there's a specific branch that's supposed to be the cop. It's called the Office of Surveillance and Compliance. That office is supposed to police the plants, run the recalls, and read the complaints from people whose pets got sick or died. Instead, it ends up being the exact office that holds the pin on one specific rule, CPG Section 675.200. We already discussed this rule earlier. This is the regulation that says food too nasty for human consumption can get routed into a pet food instead of a dumpster. The Office of Surveillance and Compliance didn't miss a loophole. The officials didn't fall asleep at the wheel. They wrote the loophole. They signed off on every single play. Farther down that hall in the same building, there's the Office of New Animal Drug Evaluation. These people sign off on vitamin packs and the chemical preservatives. That's the stuff that lets a dead pellet sit on a shelf for 2 years and still smell like cat food to a human. This same exact office runs entirely on industry fees. It costs manufacturers over $700,000 just to file an application with them, plus the fees we discussed earlier. That money comes straight from the exact companies that are sending in the paperwork to the office that is supposed to be critiquing them. That's not a referee. That's someone who's getting paid by both teams on the field. Now we'll look at one last crew in this government building, the CVM Feed Safety Team. Built as a workaround when the FDA ended its formal partnership with AAFCO. This team started putting out informal guidance documents. That's just a fancy way of saying the FDA keeps right on using ingredient rules that the members of the pet food industry wrote for themselves. If you're wondering at this point if there's some kind of real review process that your pet food has to pass, there isn't. AAFCO just absorbs the bad press. The FDA quietly hands over the legal cover story, and the shell game never even misses a beat. So that's the machine. Those are the people running the system. And here's the part that should make you really mad if you're not already. You don't have to go digging for any of this information. It's all sitting right out in the open in the official records. They aren't even trying to hide this. The FDA runs a portal where citizens report sick or dead pets. People use it constantly. Yet the agency still stands up and claims there's no real problem here. Both of these facts are true at the same time, and both are in the public record. Put these facts next to each other and the official story starts looking pretty thin really fast. Tens of millions of cats are living through this right now. Some are already in kidney failure. Some are diabetic. Some are fat and sick on food their owners paid top dollar for. Most of these cats are crying out for change, but we just don't understand them as well as we think we do. So all of this begs the most important question that this investigative report could answer. What can we feed the danged cat? Well, before I talk about that, let's be very clear on something. This video is not intended to serve as medical advice or dietary advice for you or your pet. However, I can't just talk about the problems without suggesting at least some solutions. So what follows is based on my investigations and some personal experience, and you should not take it as any form of official fact. Do with it what you will, but consult a veterinarian if you have serious concerns. At least now you can do so more mentally prepared. Let's talk about symptoms. Your kitty will rarely stop eating just out of nowhere. Things are more insidious than that. Your kitty will start eating just a little less. They'll spend more time hovering over the water bowl, trying to flush out a system that's failing on them. And they will start giving you those sharp, piercing meows. Not the feed me chirp, but a cry that says they're hurting and expects you to understand exactly what's wrong. It's almost like something bit them and they cried out. When you hear that meow, the clock is ticking. You need to take action. Go to the grocery store and skip the pet aisle entirely. No matter which option you choose, the golden rule here is hydration. You must push their system with moisture. Get as much liquid into their food as possible. Even if it means adding a few tablespoons of bottled water directly into their food, drown the food to force the hydration. Cats are designed to get moisture from what they eat, as we discussed, not what they drink. Your first option is simple. Buy canned chunk chicken breast packed in water. Do not drain it. Keep all that water right in the bowl where you serve it. Shred the chicken down completely with a fork if your cat has trouble with it. It gives them instant pure protein, and the canned water provides immediate hydration to flush their kidneys. Your second option is stage 1 plain meat baby food, such as chicken, beef, or turkey, ensuring there is 0 onion or garlic powder on the label, and a box of plain unflavored gelatin. Mix the jar of baby food with a 1/4 cup of water and a tiny pinch of the unflavored gelatin. The gelatin provides a clean collagen and amino acids their kidneys can process without working hard. The warm water brings out the scent to stimulate their fading appetite while helping to push the hydration. If you need a pure hydration boost, buy a bottle of plain unflavored Pedialyte from the baby food aisle. Mix a tablespoon of that directly in their food. It replenishes critical electrolytes when they are losing fluids rapidly. Another trick is buying unsalted bone-in chicken thighs. Boil them in plain water with absolutely no seasoning or salt. Let the food cool, shred the meat, and use the leftover broth as a highly enticing topper. These are pure, easily digestible nutrition. They have no fillers, no regulatory loopholes. They are not complete nutrition, however, so you will still need to supplement their food with a good wet cat food once they stabilize. Get the pate kind, and really take your time to read the label. Make sure that bad ingredients like carrageenan, meat byproducts, wheat gluten, artificial preservatives like BHA and BHT are not listed. Look closely and verify that real, named meats like chicken, turkey, salmon, or beef are the first 4 or 5 ingredients on the list. When the commercial machine fails them, you must become the manufacturer. If you can fix the bowl, you can probably save your kitty.